Biden canceled his trip to Ramstein. Lavrov reiterated the Kremlin's unreasonable war demands, and DPRK troops are now in Ukraine. Let's discuss with Roman Svitan. We're glad to have you here and wish you good health. Before we start, we want to address our audience. Please like this video, and if you change your mind, you can unlike it later. Also, comment where you're watching from, your city or country. We know many of you are tuning in, so please share. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to help spread our discussions. Let us take a look at some interesting news, which are emerging on the diplomatic and geopolitical level. It was reported that Biden will not attend the Ramstein meeting due to Hurricane Milton. About it was reported in the White House. On the 12th of June, the U.S. president was expected to attend a meeting of the contact group on Ukraine's defense, and it was expected that Biden would give a strong signal about further military support for our country. Against the background of this information, another statement from the president's office that the Second World Summit will not be held in the summer. Roman, do you connect these events with each other? And why, in your opinion, Biden will not come to Germany on Friday? What, in your opinion, could be the actual reasons, and what does it mean for us and for the further development of the war in Ukraine? One hurricane coming into the United States, another hurricane leaving, a solar flare, preparations for the Betelgeuse explosion, which is going to be a supernova in the next 100 years. And Biden is bound to be present. But that's certainly not the direct cause. Most likely, the reason is not being ready to make certain decisions, or not being able to, for example, fly, which can also be at a time like this. Therefore, I think that territories should be hit with the means that have been handed to us, even though there are not many of them. We will quickly learn and establish production of our own missiles. They are already working on Crimea, and quite well. We need to roll out production and scale it up, including to work on Russian territory, because we need longer ranges.
Планы по поставкам того количества боеприпасов, техники, которые нам обещали, по крайней мере, последнее время, они расписаны, никто от них не отказывается, и, в принципе, наоборот, еще есть идут положительные такие моменты, связанные с подтверждением передачи, особенно воздушные компоненты. То есть мы слышим и о поставках до конца года F-16 от Нидерландов, это не одна эскадрилья, и о поставках в начале следующего года Миражей от Франции. Ну, то есть положительных моментов достаточно для того, чтобы спланировать или спрогнозировать боевые действия. По крайней мере, вне зависимости от тех, надуманных, я бы так больше сказал, решений на этом Рамштайне, которые ждали. Не будем очаровываться, чтобы потом не разочаровываться, еще раз повторюсь. Ну, а, естественно, на этом Рамштайне еще ждали мы, допустим, некоторых разрешений по работе по российской территории. Но пока мы дождемся от Рамштайна, от наших партнеров разрешать по российской территории бить средствами поражения, которые у нас ими переданы, не в большом количестве, мы быстрее научимся и отработаем именно поставки своих ракет. Вот они работают по Крыму и довольно-таки неплохо. Надо разворачивать их, масштабировать производство и работать в том числе по российской территории. Тем более нам дальность нужна. Нам эти дальности в 250-300 километров, которые могли предположительно нам наши партнеры предоставить, они уже не актуальны.
These 250 to 300 kilometers that our partners could provide are no longer relevant. If they do and allow it, thank you very much. But we really need to work at ranges of 500, 600 kilometers. These are completely different systems. Ballistic missiles of the Grom-2 type, a large number of drones with a range of 700 kilometers. We already have jet drones. So there is nothing unusual. Biden will not come to Ramstein, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a great loss in that sense. This is the third year we've been talking about this. We need to rely on European security because all our partners will be at Ramstein, and then carry out the tasks that we can based on our capabilities.
На Рамштайне будут около 5 десятков государств, а дальше уже выполнять те задачи, которые сможем выполнить, исходя из возможностей наших партнеров.
Пане Романе, звертаємося до наших глядачів. Ви можете писати свої думки під YouTube-трансляцію прямо зараз.
In your opinion, what is the real reason why Biden cannot come to Ramstein Air Base? Right? We see everything. We read. If you have any questions, please write. We will voice them on the live broadcast. And also do not forget to put Podobaiki under this broadcast. Roman, The Telegraph published an article saying that spring was the deadliest month for the Russian army since the start of the war in Ukraine. The article states that average Russian army losses have risen to 1,271. This is about the number of soldiers killed or seriously wounded per day, which exceeded the previous peak in January, when the figure was 1,262. What is the reason for such losses and increase of this figure at this moment? It must be realized that such losses always occur on the side that is offensive, and the higher the intensity of offensive operations, the greater the losses. The minimum loss ratio is 1-3, and in the conditions the Russians are now facing, it is sometimes as high as 1-6. The Russians have very high casualties. You have correctly emphasized that these are practically irrecoverable fighters on the line of contact. These are those who have been left without arms, without legs, without heads. Russian Federation sends over 1,000 soldiers to the front daily, with a similar number rehabilitated through effective recruitment centers, offering financial incentives and social packages, sometimes amounting to millions of rubles. This compensates for the heavy losses at the front, with an equal number of new recruits.
Вроде как, с одной стороны, большие потери на линии боевого соприкосновения, они коррелируются или нивелируются.
In other words, the overall balance of Russian troops on the line of contact remains the same. About 600,000 Russians are now engaged in combat missions against Ukraine on different parts of the front. So the higher the intensity of the fighting, the more they try to advance, the greater their losses will be.
На разных участках фронта. Потому чем больше будет интенсивность боев, чем больше россияне будут пытаться наступать, тем больше у них будут потери.
Once again, they compensate them by putting about the same number of new Russian terrorists into service. But Roman, we have non-transparent news from the front. Deep state analysts are convinced that the Russian invaders have occupied 2 more settlements on the country's landmass. The enemy has occupied Jelany Pervshe and Stelmachivka in Luhansk region, and the enemy has also penetrated the Maximilianivka area in Donetsk region. What does the capture or partial capture of these settlements mean, and what is the general situation on the front now? What advantages does the enemy have now? And after the actual loss of Vuhledar, what has changed along the entire front line?
Вугледара, що зараз змінилося?
Вдоль всей линии фронта россияне пытаются наступать. Почему оттуда и потери, мы только сейчас с вами про это поговорили, большие. Причем
Russia is not attempting major attacks, leading to significant losses. In recent weeks, they've focused on achieving tactical goals, particularly trying to stabilize the front line south of Pokrovsk, which explains the increased pressure around Selidov and Kurakov. From Vuhledar, they're attempting to push our troops towards Bogoyavlenka. The pressure on the southern part of the Donetsk front will intensify in the near future until heavy rains limit the possibility of redeployment of forces and assets. On average, on the eastern front, the enemy is advancing by 250 to 300 meters daily, taking control of either our lines or small settlements, but advancing nonetheless.
Давление идет российское, где-то они продвигаются в среднем по Восточному фронту примерно на 250-300 метров ежедневно. Потому через определенное время, естественно, они берут под контроль либо некоторые наши рубежи, либо, допустим, некоторые населенные пункты. Пусть небольшие, но тем не менее. То есть, так как
The population density in Donbass is high. There are many populated areas, and small groups are taking control of them at different levels, either direct or by fire. We are talking today about several populated areas near Pokrovsk. This is the Pokrovsk direction.
Это в районе Покровска, это Покровское направление как таковое. Россияне также пытаются использовать последние деньки сухой осенней погоды и для выхода на Оскол.
The Russians are also trying to use the last dry autumn days to reach the left bank of the Oskol, south of Kupiansk and Kupiansko-Uzlovoye. That is, they are trying to reach two crossings near Kolesnikovka and Borovoy. It is still far to Borovaya, but closer to Kolesnikovka they are already approaching. There are only a few kilometers left to the left bank of the Oskol.
Если будет достаточное количество боеприпасов, то, в принципе, мы можем нивелировать Луганское, попытки...
The situation is challenging, but with enough ammunition, we can counter Russian actions on the Luhansk front. In the southeast, Kurakovo is under pressure due to our troops' forced withdrawal from Vuhledar, which occurred because the TRO and bust units were unprepared for combat, leaving the 72nd Brigade in a difficult position.
72-ю бригаду в неудобное положение, пришлось выходить из Угледара. Но этим самым мы послабили, просели по...
This has weakened the southern front, creating big problems in Kurakovo. If we don't reinforce this direction with enough resources, we will have to withdraw from Kurakovo as well, which will practically lead to the collapse of the southern part of the Eastern Front.
южной части Восточного фронта. Потому этого бы не хотелось допускать. Почему? Потому что россияне тогда однозначно будут продолжать давление в течение зимы.
We must prevent the Russians from maintaining pressure during winter, as it would allow them to advance without fear of flank attacks. This is a matter for our military and political leadership. We've discussed the possibility of integrating our internal troops, including the National Guard and part of the National Police, into the armed forces of Ukraine. As well as the transfer of the Territorial Completion Center. That's 50,000 fighters, which will strengthen the management of brigades, and commanders will figure out what to do with them.
С другой стороны, усилит количеством бойцов, сами бригады, комбриги разберутся, что с ними делать. Есть возможность.
There is an opportunity to hold the front line, then we will look at the decision. Roman, today you were wondering about the Mirage 2000 aircrafts, and not only France will supply Ukraine with Mirage 2000 aircrafts in the first quarter of 2025. French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu announced this. According to him, these aircraft will be equipped with innovative systems, including types of air-to-air, ground-to-air, and protection against radiolocation detection. In your opinion, what is the potential number of aircraft? Will there not be problems with the training of Ukrainian pilots and mechanics, as was the case with the F-16 aircraft? Also, can there be problems with the timing of the delivery of these aircraft? We had a history with F-16s when we were promised a certain scope of deliveries, but the process was constantly delayed. Could this happen with the Mirage 2000? The delivery time has already been extended, i.e. they were going to deliver Mirage by the end of the year, but it has already been reported that it will be delivered in the first quarter of next year. In principle, this may be more or less a realistic time frame, because the whole issue is really about training. Our flight crew, which was once trained in Great Britain, one group went to France to fly the Alpha jet. They conducted a certain flight program on the Alpha jet, which is mainly used now for training of flight personnel, so that they could then fly F-16s, depending on the reconfigurable training program, or let's say the same Mirage, Rafale, Eurofighter. That is, by and large, quite a wide range of aircraft. But nevertheless, this aircraft was most likely used to train our flight crews for missions, and most likely it has already passed the time. In principle, our pilots can fly already on Mirage, and for certain tasks on this airplane, it is enough in principle 3 to 4 months. The deadlines have shifted, and we can expect the planes to be guaranteed by the first quarter of 2025. The optimal service option would be one squadron, potentially forming a mixed brigade. This could include both a Su-24 squadron and a Mirage squadron for specific combat missions.
Может быть потом смешанная бригада, это возможно без проблем по большому счету, допустим, бригада, в которую могут входить эскадрилья там Су-24, эскадрилья Миражей и эскадрилья даже F-16.
But optimally, of course, a squadron for the Su-24 or Su-25 and a squadron of, let's say, Mirage. Then the squadron commander will fully prepare his flight crew for combat missions and engineering staff. Depending on the weapons that will be delivered with these aircraft, we will already see them on the battlefield. Basically, they will be used. Mirage will be used to work on land and on water. That is avionics, which is now being finalized. By the way, this could also be one of the reasons why the transfer time was delayed and the deadline was moved from the end of the year to the beginning of next year. There is a certain modification of these airplanes. The avionics are being changed to work against ground and surface targets. And, of course, this airplane will be used as a fighter interceptor. That is, it can perform combat missions to destroy Russian air targets with air-to-air missiles. So this integrated approach, I think, will enable us to utilize at least 2 squadrons of aircraft early next year. Friends, we have more than 2,000 regular viewers online. Thank you very much for your support. Also, do not forget about the likes under this video and write traditionally your city, your country, where you see us from. We read everything, we see everything. The geography of our audience is very interesting. Roman, good news. Exactly 2 years ago, a legendary special unit of the Ukrainian security service bombed a Crimean town. On January 8th, 22nd, Vasyl Malyuk's team managed to blow up a truck with an explosion right in the middle of the bridge. As Russian propaganda keeps saying, this is indeed one of the most protected objects in Russia. It is symbolic that the Crimean city, second, the next day after the 70th anniversary of the dictator's bunker Adja. What role does the Crimean city play now in the logistical plan for the occupants? Will its destruction change the course of the war, or do you think it is inappropriate to talk about it now? Indeed, 2 years ago, under the leadership of General Malyuk, a serious operation was developed, as a result of which the security service accomplished a very difficult task. Nevertheless, explosives weighing more than 20 tons in TNT equivalent were used, and then the Kerch Bridge was put out of operation for a long time, literally for 6 months. I note in principle that the railroad branch line after this strike has not been able to be fully operational until now. So we can say that Malyuk's team from the Ukrainian Security Service damaged this Kerch Bridge by at least 30%. And the Russians will not restore it for various reasons. One of which, this will likely be the 3rd strike because the second one was also struck by uncrewed boats, security, and the destruction of the automobile portion of that bridge was epic. I think that the 3rd strike will completely put an end to the history of using this unnecessary facility on the territory of Ukraine. Question: how to approach it? It is very difficult now. The Russians have reinforced it from all sides.
Подойти, начиная от трипангов и заканчивая космическими войсками. Все этот мост сейчас обороняют
Even the space forces are defending it, realizing that there will be a third strike and we will destroy it. What is the purpose of destroying it? Through this bridge, while there is still a road connection to the Russian mainland and Crimea, there is a railroad line, which of course has been reduced by at least half. Nevertheless, small railway trains, a few cars, that is, they have stopped pulling 300 tons. Now they are small trains, but nevertheless they are pulling across this bridge, including weapons.
Сейчас небольшие несколько вагонов, но тем не менее они протягивают через этот мост, в том числе и вооружение, плюс по этому мосту идут энергокабеля и...
The bridge also carries energy cables and pipelines for water and fuel, making it a critical logistical supply route for the Russians to Crimea. Destroying it would disrupt their supply chains, impacting the western and southern front, including Kherson and parts of Zaporozhye, especially before the branch railroad connection from Rostov is fully operational. This presents an opportunity to cut off their ammunition supplies to these areas. Roman, North Korea may send its troops to Ukraine to provide assistance to Russia, the head of the Ministry of National Defense of North Korea, Kim Un-han, has said. The DPRK has sent a limited number of troops for engineering purposes. You and I have spoken on several occasions about the troops of North Korea on the territory of our country, that they have been spotted on the battlefield, more precisely, in more quiet places, in the temporarily occupied territories. But Roman, in your opinion, can North Korea send troops to fight on the territory of Ukraine? And what number of troops can we talk about if they are going to do so? The engineering forces are indeed represented there. Parts of the engineering forces, especially in escorting North Korean shells and ammunition. They have been coming in since last year, testing some of their samples on the battlefield in the so-called field conditions, in combat conditions, taking down certain information and reporting, of course, their findings. These are accompanying engineering troops. There were also units that worked in the rear units. But we've gotten to them, and recently there has been confirmed information that North Korean servicemen, among others, are being destroyed. Line units, that is, units that along the battle line will be deployed, may be put on the battlefield, and that may already be happening. Why? Because there's nothing stopping, in principle, Russians and North Koreans from participating in the war against Ukraine and in the genocide of the Ukrainian people. Most of the republics that support Russia send their fighters and allow them to go as mercenaries in the Russian army. We observe this on the battlefield, and we record information that there are many states that look past such mercenarism of their citizens, from India to the same North Korea. But, nevertheless, no linear units have been seen yet, exactly those that can be brought to the battlefield, although theoretically it is possible. Will the North Koreans do it? That's the big question. Depends on what Putin requests and what he promises them. There is nothing that is not for sale in this world. If something cannot be bought for a lot of money, it can be bought for a lot of money. If Putin offers a very large fee, in principle, North Korean linear military units may appear on our front, but they will be first and foremost destroyed by all forces and means. I think all the other side, what I call the white side of the world, starting with the South Koreans, Japanese, Taiwanese, and Americans, will help destroy them wherever possible. In North Korea, you can't destroy them. There are certain UN caveats in place, but in our country, they can appear on the battlefield, and we can destroy them.
будут помогать все их уничтожать там, где это можно сделать. В Северной Корее их нельзя уничтожать. Их там удерживают некоторые ООНовские предостережения. А у нас, пожалуйста, появятся на нашем поле боя.
I think all of Ramstein would support maximizing the amount of forces and assets aimed at destroying North Korean units.
Я думаю, весь Рамштайн будет за двумя руками, чтобы максимальное количество сил и средств было направлено непосредственно на уничтожение северокорейских частей.
Очільник МЗС РФ Сергій Лавров запевнив, що як тільки Захід схвалить застосування далекобійних ракет, Росія буде діяти...
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned that a response would come as soon as the West praises the use of long-range missiles. Roman, how are such statements by Lavrov perceived in the West? We remember that there were some signals that we would be allowed to strike after the elections in the United States of America. How can this really affect the decision-making center? Nothing will happen at all. If today there are strikes on Russian territory, let us say the same ATACMS, the Russians will not react in any way, just as they reacted to the entry of Ukrainian troops and NATO weapons. The entire NATO arsenal is now in the Kursk region and has been operating for the third month. There has been no reaction or even indignation from the Russian Federation, which means that there will be absolutely no reaction to long-range strikes. This is the logic of warfare. If we are given weapons, we can use them however we want. If North Korea hands the Russians weapons, they use them to hit Kyiv. The same Chinese or Iranian drones or missiles. By and large, there is nothing to give any ultimatums for.
Можем их использовать где угодно. Но если северокорейцы россиянам передают оружие, оно бьет по Киеву, ну какие еще вопросы могут быть? Или тоже китайские те же шахеды, которые, в принципе, это подсолнух 200 китайские или иранские ракеты, или те же северокорейские, я уже говорил, ракеты. То есть, по большому счету, тут не за что предъявить какие-то ультиматумы. Это все работает.
The sooner a decision is made, the more of the Russian army will be destroyed.
Больше российской армии будет уничтожено. Это основная задача нашей армии и наших партнеров, в том числе уничтожение армии противника.
The work, let us say, on international platforms that we ourselves have invented and made possible also applies to peace summits. Why is it likely to be postponed now? Because what is there to talk about? A peace summit while a Russian soldier is on our territory is not a peace summit, but a capitulation. Lavrov was clearly given the opportunity to formalize his demands for this surrender, withdrawal from the 5 regions, non-aligned status, disarmament, and so on. It was not necessary to invent such formalization in order to prevent it.
Для того, чтобы не давать возможности вот такой формализации, не надо же ее придумывать. Сами в прошлом году придумали.
Last year, you came up with these summits yourself, and now you have to listen to these demands, and not only from Lavrov. At this summit, you have already put forward demands from the South, the so-called Chinese Peace Initiative. They are basically generators. Again, this is formalization. Because of what? Because of the fact that they invented these summits, which now have to be abandoned. And there is nowhere else to go, because the people of Ukraine and the Ukrainian army have not authorized any politician to capitulate, and politicians know this very well. So now they will squirm in one place to get out from under this pressure. So why was it necessary to invent this? Or arrest those generators of these random thoughts who came up with these peace summits. Don't arrest them under Article 1 Wedlan. Take them. Try them. First, bring them to the knowledge of who gave the command, and then judge them. Let the court determine.
Такую ситуацию. Нам приходится откладывать саммит, то есть его переносить или отказываться от него. Но, тем не менее, задача выполнена. Лавров уже формализует свои требования. Россия формализует, по большому счету, условия капитуляции Украины. Вот получили эту торпеду, теперь попробуйте ее как-то от нее как-то увернуться. Ну, посмотрим, как эти генераторы случайных идей с капитуляцией будут уворачиваться от такого рода претензий.
Пане Романе, від заяв Лаврова до не менш абсурдних заяв Лукашенка. Ми завжди залишаємо його на десерт з вами на нашому стрімі. Під час свого візиту до Москви білоруський диктатор пообіцяв Києву у випадку нападу на Білорусь серйозний головний біль. І білоруський лідер, диктатор Олександр Лукашенко, заявив, що
Kyiv faces a significant challenge if Belarus is attacked, as dictator Oleksandr Lukashenko claimed that such an attack would lead to the collapse of the Ukrainian government. He made this statement during an interview with Russian propagandists after arriving in Russia. It raises questions about the nature of the offensive. Lukashenko is referencing whether it's a fabrication or something else entirely. It's unclear, like a celebration of something standing next to it. Roman, on this positive note, I propose to put 3 points on our conversation.
То есть там и Алиевы, и Пашиняны, и вся Средняя Азия, бывшего вплоть до Токаева, до Казахстана. Приехали поздравить, скорее всего, с очередным прожиганием жизни Путина. То есть примерно так. Ну и каждый-то, конечно, какой-то такой прочерк оставил о своем пребывании. Лукашенко вот очередной опус о каких-то мнимых наступательных действиях. Да если будет принято решение, допустим, заходить в Беларусь, помогать белорусскому народу, то пару недель не будет Лукашенко в Беларуси. Он будет в Пекине сидеть, даже не в Москве, он сразу в Пекин чухнет. Там у него уже пагода приготовлена, и картошка растет рядом. То есть этот вопрос уже решен по большому счету. Просто нам этого не нужно. Есть определенные механизмы, как, допустим, с соседями жить. И мы ж не россияне, мы не будем нападать на соседнюю страну, если нет никаких для этого предпосылок. Пока на данный момент никаких предпосылок нападать на Беларусь нет абсолютно. Потому никто этого делать не будет. Потому где там в каких снах Лукашенко летает и для чего он там решил очередной раз лизнуть Путину пятую точку, ну это уже вопрос к нему. Это же опять проблемы, как только переваливает за седьмой десяток, начинаются проблемы такого плана.
Пане Романе, на цій позитивній ноті пропоную поставити 3 крапки в нашій розмові.
Thank you for this informative conversation. Roman Svitan, instructor, reserve colonel in the Ukrainian army, traditionally answers the most important question of the day. Vladyslav Solovyov was with you. Olga Bilan.